On the surface, a good story should stand as just that. Its deliverance should be irrelevant when considering its inner workings. In the world we live in, authors sign book deals, turning their works into feature films or franchises. Comic books are turned into Hollywood blockbusters, with great effect in most cases. Harry Potter, The Lord of the Rings, The Great Gatsby, to name a few, prove that a thorough, well-told story has its place across different forms of media. So, why haven't movies adapted from video games been quite as successful? Video games are a hugely popular and profitable pastime. A snapshot of the gaming landscape shows a collection of widely contrasted and unique perspectives faceted from every corner. Yet, when it comes to turning these games into 90-minute plus feature films, directors and producers have struggled to translate the necessary feel required to make the transition comfortable. For example, Hitman Agent 47, released in 2015, is a film that highlights how badly Hollywood missed the point and what made the game so successful. The movie was for its part well directed. A clear effort was made to try and convey a consistent tone. In the games, you take control of Agent 47, a hitman with an ungodly knack for knocking out foes and donning their uniforms before eliminating whoever the main subject may be in any given mission. Cool, calm and wordless, ruthless in his execution. Again, Rupert Friend does a decent enough job of portraying a man disassociated from the world he operates in. The adaptation, however, falls apart in nearly every other aspect. The problem that Hitman and most other game-to-film conversions have is that it doesn't have the same effect. Something just feels off, like there's something missing. For the lack of a better phrase, they were video games in the first place, for a reason. Most video games with stories enticing enough to attract the attention of Hollywood usually last longer than 90 to 120 minutes, the typical runtime for a theatrical release. The Last of Us, a video game lauded for its story, takes around 12 to 14 hours to complete from start to finish. Condensing all the aspects of the story into a film wouldn't be easy. Comparatively, The Lord of the Rings was a substantial collection of books, translated into three-hour plus films. It's an easier marriage of ideas. A book translates into a movie well due to the way in which the story is delivered. Events and sequences are relayed at you in a semi-passive way, in both books and films. You're given the ingredients to invest in the story from the outset. Linear in its delivery, you're given no sense of control over the progression of the story, meaning your appreciation of the work is subjective. When reading a book, it's near impossible for your imagination not to create a visual through the text. It may not be vivid, but due to the descriptive nature of novels and the fact that they don't have the aid of pictures, visualization of what you're reading is an inevitability. Video games, however, are interactive experiences, relying on the player to act as the instigator of the story's events or be reactive to them. The interactivity of controlling an on-screen character forges a unique unity. While it's possible to extrapolate the story, the delivery of said story changes a discernible amount. The fact that you play games instead of watching them makes this perspective shift jarring. Where the waters become even murkier is the legacy of most video game stories' conception. Video games undoubtedly in the last 10 years have taken a lot of cues from the world of film. Spectacle and bombast are expected parts of the likes of Battlefield, Halo, Call of Duty and Uncharted. All the aforementioned games, interestingly, happen to share a lot of the same story beats of many successful films. Halo's story isn't exactly groundbreaking. In essence, it's a futuristic world where the fight for intergalactic supremacy rages on, where the lines between good and evil become blurred, a la Star Wars and Star Trek. If Halo was adapted into a motion picture because of the sense of limitation or the lack of originality in its story, there would be notable detractors. When the same story is removed from the interactive housing and into its passive form, the flaws within the stories come under closer inspection. Shortcomings become exposed. Yet of course, there's always an exception to any rule. If turning a video game that has an overarching story or narrative into a film isn't working, then what about the games that don't focus too much on the story?
Rhythm.
Need for Speed may just be the best example we have of a film that made a successful transition to the silver screen. Released in 2014, Need for Speed, made for a budget of around $65 million, received negative to mixed reviews at best, but went on to make a respectable $200 million worldwide. Need for Speed, an Electronic Arts game, has a rich and storied history. It's a series that's been around for over 20 years, so there's a very good chance that if you play racing or driving games at all, then you've probably taken an edition of Need for Speed for a spin. However, it's never exactly been a game known for its storytelling chops. It's flirted with the idea of injecting a little more Hollywood-esque context into the formula over the years, but it's never really panned out. Need for Speed The Run, released in 2011, even had the input from Mr. Michael Transformers Bay himself. It still didn't work. The film, although far from a masterpiece, did. It worked for a number of reasons. First off, Need for Speed, the movie, follows Toby Marshall, played by Aaron Paul, as he sets out across the United States in order to avenge the death of one of his close friends, who just so happened to be killed in a street race due to the actions of Dominic Cooper's Dino Brewster. Nothing original there then, especially for the Need for Speed series, whose games have often featured slightly cliched plots. But the movie's execution of this tale wavers from the norm in one key area. Unlike many blockbusters or films wherein the protagonist skates the line of morality, we rarely witness what Need for Speed shows us: consequences for your actions. Due to the incident mentioned prior, Toby Marshall was apprehended by the authorities, and being unable to explain his participation in the accident and the circumstances, he's sentenced to 2 years in a correctional facility. Straight away, Need for Speed attempts something out of the ordinary for films of this ilk. The protagonist isn't immune to the normality of the real world. If you do something wrong, you'll be punished. It's usually enough in most films for the protagonist to be affected in a purely emotional sense in these circumstances. Not here though. It helps establish a clear tone to the viewer. It makes them aware of the stakes involved clearly from the outset. The actions of the characters within the movie have real stakes and can pose jeopardy to both life and one's freedom. The basic premise works too. You end up rooting for Toby and his, thankfully for the film, likeable friends. The true measure of the film, however, lies in its set pieces. Created with as little CGI as humanly possible, Need for Speed manages to match and exceed regularly anything we've seen in the Need for Speed game to date. Director Scott Vaughn does a tremendous job of capturing the essence of the franchise. Unlike Hitman Agent 47, unlike Lara Croft Tomb Raider and Assassin's Creed, Need for Speed manages to stay faithful to the albeit limited source material, while also delivering a true movie-like experience. On a general movie level though, Need for Speed isn't a great one. The plot is rather one note. Several scenarios require you to leave all sense of reality you have at the door, and its villain and his motivations are never fully realised. But it shows promise. It shows hope that studios are beginning to think outside of the box in terms of what video game licenses to acquire. Campo Santo, the makers of last year's Firewatch, are in the early stages of developing a screenplay for the film adaptation of their award-winning game. Its take on storytelling was a breath of fresh air for the video games industry, and it could generally make for a compelling feature film. There may yet be time for Hollywood and the games industry to strike up a successful collaboration. In fairness to Hollywood, it is trying. We are no longer made to put up with the likes of the Super Mario Bros. Movie and Doom. Publishers are growing wary of letting studios have too much control over their intellectual properties too, instead opting to have a more active role in the production process. It may not always work, as Assassin's Creed showed, but it's a step in the right direction. Films and video games will, however, always be at odds with one another. As two of the biggest art forms in the media, they're constantly battling one another for the money in our wallets, the hours of our free time, and the love and appreciation we show for them. A better marriage of ideas on the surface may seem beneficial for all. I, for one though, prefer my video games to be nothing more than just that, a video game, and nothing more.